If you're anything like me, then looking back to the old times is something you probably do pretty frequently, especially in this day and age when the world seems obsessed with trying to find new ways to set itself on fire. There's just something about looking back to a time gone by and remembering those simpler days. And for me, nothing really hits my nostalgia sweet spot more than when the N64 was the dominant video game console in my life, at least. I love the N64. It held a very special place and time in my life, and the games on it are some of my most fondly remembered ones, from Ocarina of Time and Mario 64 to the original Smash Brothers, which at this point doesn't really hold up that well, but you know, I liked it, and especially Banjo-Kazooie. But there's one game that holds an extra special place with me, mainly because it was the only video game I owned for about 7 years, and that game is Star Fox 64. I mean, sure, we rented plenty of other games, mainly the ones I just listed, but for the longest time, the only game I had at the ready to go to was Star Fox 64. I've been in an especially nostalgic mood lately because of reasons, but it's just given me an itch to go back and play Star Fox 64 again, and it reminded me of how much I enjoy this game. It also brought back the bittersweet memory of me trading the game away when I was 12 for Glover.
You were supposed to trade me Banjo-Kazooie, Sean. You knew that was a raw deal and you brought me subpar goods.
Star Fox will always be special to me. It's by no means my favorite game, but it was my game, and the only game I had for a very long time. It seems to be pretty special to Nintendo too, considering of the 8 Star Fox games they've made, 4 of them are at least some variation of the original one they put out on SNES. And in my humble opinion, 64 will probably always be the best, especially considering how they just can't seem to do any better than that. In fact, as a kid, I didn't even know that there was a Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, and it wasn't until last week that I even played the game. Of course, that shouldn't be too surprising considering I also only played about half the levels in 64 until last week too, but you know, who's counting? Looking back at the original Star Fox first, I can't help but see it as the technical marvel it was meant to be at the time. I mean, just look at the way it opens. You've got those moody chords, stuff zipping past you, stars floating by, things exploding. Am I in Star Wars? As awesome as that intro is though, I admittedly didn't get much farther. Some things, for me at least, just do not hold up. And as visually impressive as it is for a Super Nintendo game, those graphics to me nowadays are more of a hindrance than anything else. Maybe it's just me, but at times I can't tell what's shooting me, who I'm shooting at, what's going to hit me, what won't hit me, and my team keeps flying in front of me while I'm shooting and complaining when they get hit, like, Jesus Christ, Slippy, if you don't want me to shoot you, then don't fly in front of me when I'm trying to take the bogey off your tail. For me, the original is something interesting to look back on as something that got made better. Because if this was impressive in 1993, then this was absolutely mind-blowing in 97. The ships have actual textures, you have an actual reticle for aiming, you can see reflections on the water and the pilots and their ships, and the entire game is voice acted, which was a rarity at the time for Nintendo 64 games. We're just going to completely disregard the fact in this instance that the PlayStation was released in 1995 and probably had other similar looking games at the time, but looking back on it, I'm almost frustrated that my feeble child brain couldn't fully appreciate this game for what it was. I was never able to make a connection on how much of a huge leap forward this was compared to playing Sonic on my Sega Genesis. But with hindsight, I love looking back on how much this game was trying to achieve. I mean, for me, it was the pack-in game with my N64, so they wanted to impress with people just picking up the system for the first time, and it shows. When you start up the main game, you're immediately greeted with a Star Wars-esque text crawl. There's an evil monkey guy that makes the world bad, and then he gets exiled to a horror world called Venom. Later, when he starts making trouble again, James McCloud, Fox's dad, goes to check it out. But it's there on Venom that one of James' own turns on him and shoots him down, and his other wingman barely escapes. And then that's where we come in. With that short little preamble out of the way, we play as James' son Fox and his new team flying through the solar system and taking out bad guys. There's plenty of variety in these levels too, and it's something that I always appreciated. You've got your Hoth-like planet, your Tatooine-like planet, your Alderaan, and even a Death Star lookalike, and at least one of them that should have probably been left out altogether. Unlike the first Star Fox, you don't have 3 distinct paths for you to choose from and dictate what your playthrough is like. In this game, the level you go to next is determined by how well you play through each level. Or, if you were me as a child, pretty much the easy path only, because it was only last week that I learned the absolute BS you have to do to finish the hard path and find a completely different boss on Corneria. Like, what? As a kid, I would sometimes make it to Solar after the dogfight on Hoth. That was originally supposed to be a joke, but I honestly don't know what the planet is called at this point. And it was there that I pretty much died immediately. In fact, I don't think I really saw the boss too much, if at all, potentially within this last week. It was always a pretty bad time for me. No! Perhaps you can see why I traded the game as a kid. I mean, you can only play through the easy path so many times before it gets a little tiring and frustrating seeing all those levels on the left side of the map that you can never ever possibly dream of making it to. But now, all these years later, after finally being able to access that forbidden fruit, my appreciation for this game is renewed. I mean, the game is just filled to the brim with personality and character moments, helped along mostly by the fact that the entire game is fully voice acted. You just get so many peeks into each character's personality and relationships through those little bits of spoken dialogue. Your teammates show care and concern, and enemies taunt you in a variety of ways, and Peppy just seemingly can't wait to bring up your dead dad every chance he gets.
You're becoming more like your father. Your father helped me like that too. This brings back memories of your dad.
Playing this game again all these years later just made me realize that probably my favorite part of the game is all of its bosses. I can very clearly remember telling people about the game as a child, complete with dramatic and cringy reenactments of the dialogue. And even after all this time, those lines stick in my head. Playing through the easy route is such a throwback for me, and I was able to quote nearly every single line either before or as it was happening. There's just so much variety and challenge to these bosses, and playing through the hard route can get pretty intense, at least if you're me and playing it for the first time, like 15 years later. I like to categorize the bosses into 3 main types. You have your enemy ships piloted by snarky characters, which are my personal favorite. Then you have abhorrent nightmare creatures that you have to fight at the end of certain levels. And then there's the dogfight rounds. At a couple points in the game, you'll come up against Starwolf, Star Fox's cleverly named rivals who clearly have nothing better to do than to obsess over the Fox team. Their earlier encounter is nothing too bad. I remember playing it as a kid and it being decently challenging and memorable, with each of the characters getting some nice dialogue thrown in, but hoo boy does their second encounter get all sorts of frustrating. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just need to get good. But the second Starwolf fight is a test on my patience. Plenty of other bosses in the game have been frustratingly difficult for me, but once I figured out the method, it was no trouble usually. Starwolf returns at the very end of the hard path, and they are a fitting stop before the big bad Andross. They come back with upgraded ships and mechanized body parts, and they are better than their old selves and you in every single way. They fly faster, they turn tighter, and they can pretty much read your every single move. And to make matters worse, at a certain point, your teammates will just stop helping you. You could have 2 remaining teammates and 2 Starwolf pilots left, and they will just dink around the map doing absolutely nothing, while the 2 Starwolf ships hound you back and forth across the map and double team you to death.
Quit dinking around, Cliff.
I honestly don't even remember how I finished this fight, but I have a feeling it involved a lot of somersaults and incidental chip damage. The easy path actually gives you a traditional level on Venom with probably one of my favorite bosses. It's an odd one with very little context, but I always enjoyed it for just how different it was. But I suppose it also fits in with how weird things get from there on out. Andross fights have become somewhat iconic within the Star Fox series, and they all play out pretty similarly. He's always a giant disembodied monkey head with floating hands, and he swipes at you and will shoot lasers and inhales and chews you up and spits out a bunch of debris. It's really weird. There's usually a second mode to all of these Andross fights too, and in 64 you actually have two. On the easy path, once you break down his initial facade, he turns into what I can only describe as like one of those clapping monkey toys, but like if it was just the animatronics and the head that were like chomping at you. It's really weird. However, if you truly want to be Andross and get the good ending, you of course have to fight him at the end of the hard path. And instead of a mechanical monkey head, you get his floating eyes and brain, and they make a brain pun. It's really weird. I don't like it.
Only I have the brains to rule Lilac.
And again, maybe I just need to get good. Maybe it's just me, but the second half of the Andross fight has the same issues as the revamped Starwolf, at least with the brain portion. The eyes I don't really have any trouble with, but you'd think that a brain would be pretty easy, right? It's just all floating around and exposed and squishy, but apparently not when it can teleport and has these weird, gross brain tentacles that like grab you, and I just don't like it, okay? Once you dispatch of him though, on either difficulty, you get treated to your own A New Hope style award ceremony. Get it? Like Star Wars? Have I mentioned Star Wars enough in this video? Do you get it? Because it's like Star Wars. It's like Star Wars. Do you get it? Do you get it? The R-Wings are just X-Wing. And then you can rest easy knowing the galaxy is safe as long as you beat it on hard, of course. That pretty much wraps up my thoughts on Star Fox 64, a game that was so special to me, if only because it was the only game I had for such a long period of time as a kid. I really hope you enjoyed me recounting the tale of the one game I had as a kid, and I really appreciate it if you made it this far in the video. If you liked what you saw, you can leave me a like. Those really do help out a lot, and if you want to see what I'm going to be doing next, you can subscribe and maybe share the video with a friend, because that also helps out a lot too. Thanks so much for watching.
Good luck.
You could have two remaining... God, you just scared the crap out of me. No.